G'day there, friends and family, and welcome to this episode of the Baku podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been a little while since I've made one of these again. So I'd like to talk about overthinking because, of course, overthinking is a form of procrastinating that afflicts many of us when we set out upon our creative endeavours, particularly those creative endeavours where somebody's not paying us, where there is no pressure for us to perform except for that pressure or expectation that we put on ourselves. But how helpful is that pressure? How helpful are those expectations? So to help us understand overthinking, I'd like to talk a little bit today about under-9s finals basketball because, hey, proud dad moment there last Saturday morning watching my son Jethro. I'd also like to talk about unsolicited public art installations and the concept of phenomenology. And after that, I'd also like to share a quote from Bruce Lee. And hopefully by the end there, I'll be able to tie it all up neatly, wrapped in some universal truths and tied off with a bow, or perhaps a tangled mess of universal ribbons. But you can be the judge of that. So to begin with, let's talk about under-9s basketball. This is something that, unless you're a parent or perhaps a grandparent or an auntie or an uncle or perhaps a family friend of a young person, you're very unlikely to have been delighted to be entertained by under-9s basketball this last season. Now, this is an eye-opener for me. I didn't play basketball as a kid. I didn't play any team sports as a kid, actually, and I'm thinking I kind of missed out because watching Jed play under-9s basketball has been absolutely fantastic. And I know what we're comparing it to because since Jed's been obsessed with basketball, we've been watching quite a few NBA games in our house. So we've seen how the pros play, and yeah, they're good, right? 7 foot tall, dunking all over the place, shooting 3-pointers. Pretty much, though, it's kind of predictable. One team scores, then the other team scores. Then the other team scores, then the other team scores. Very predictable, very high percentage basketball. Under-9s, on the other hand, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you are a parent and you've had the joy of experiencing kids' basketball. Under-9s is a very different beast. You're never quite sure if the shot is going to touch the backboard for a start, let alone go in. You're never sure if the second, third, or fourth shot is going to go in. And you're never sure if who gets the ball from the rebound will actually retain the ball beyond 1 or 2 bounces. The suspense is a killer. Emotions run high. And I remember as a kid hearing stories about parents being evicted from the local basketball stadium because of their unkind behaviour towards the 15-year-old spotty referees. I get it. I get it now. I didn't really understand it back then. I'm like, it's kids' basketball. Why are you behaving that way, you unsophisticated Neanderthals? But now I get it. I could become one of those unsophisticated Neanderthals abusing the 15-year-old umpires because the emotions run really, really high. And particularly when it comes to semi-finals, which Jed played this weekend. And let me tell you, it was a close game. The Surf Coast Sea Eagles, Jed's team, took on the Titans. And in the last, I want to say 3 minutes of the game, the Titans exceeded the number of fouls that they're allowed. So during the game, if you foul another player and it's, if it's not a shooting foul, then it just goes, it's turnover. The other team gets the ball from the sideline. But if you exceed 8 or 9 fouls for the game, every single foul from that point forward goes straight to the free throw line. Now, this proved to be quite advantageous for Jed's team, who was down by 6 or 7 points at that stage of the game. They were fouled in succession 3 or 4 times and managed to drop enough baskets to be trailing by just 3 points with only 40 seconds left on the clock. At this point, kids are crumbling. There are basketball singlets being sucked on and chewed by anxious little 9-year-olds waiting to find out what will happen. Kids are off the court crying because they've crumbled under the pressure. And this is the proud dad moment. Jed, on the other hand, says, I love finals basketball. With 40 seconds left, Jed gains possession of the ball. He dribbles it back down into his half, weaving between a sea of opposition players who are all desperately trying to stop him, but also know that they can't foul him. So the defense is kind of a little bit looser than it was earlier in the game. Jed puts up a shot from the corner of the key, manages to draw a foul at the same time. Now, the shot goes in, scoring 2 points. They now trail by 1 point with less than 40 seconds on the clock. Jed steps up to the free throw line. Now, if it was me under that sort of pressure, less than a minute left in the game, 1 point the difference, it all feels like it's riding on your shoulders. Kid, cool as a cucumber, puts up his free throw. It drops. There's a fist pump, and the group regathers for the final play of the game. Now, unbelievable skill and fortitude and emotional resilience displayed by those under 9s on the weekend, which I think, if we're talking about overthinking, you can't overthink a game of basketball. You can't overthink a game of anything, because once you start getting in your head, you'll crumble. The emotions will overcome you, and you end up being paralyzed by the expectations and the fear. So what does this all have to do with unsolicited public art installations, you may ask? I'm glad you asked, because around here at the moment, public art installations have been going up all over the place. There's a bunch of new factories here in Torquay, and these provide large grey concrete canvases for the local mural artists to engage in their public art installations. Now, the opinions on Facebook vary quite significantly with regard to these unsolicited artworks, which I actually find quite amusing and entertaining, and given their positioning and kind of out of view of most people most of the time, they bring a little bit of colour to what would otherwise be a very grey landscape. So you know where I stand on this. But the opinions on Facebook, on the Surf Coast Community Notice Board, range quite significantly. Which brings us to an understanding of a term called phenomenology, which I had to look up, and it's a term I came across on Shepard Fairey's website. Now, Shepard Fairey, if you haven't heard of him, I'm not sure where you've been living, but Shepard Fairey is one of the most significantly recognised, renowned, sought after street artists at the moment, who also makes a lot of political and culturally significant work in the form of posters and clothing, and he's responsible for a brand called Obey. So in art school, he started with a very simple stencil of a face, and the face was a fella called Andre the Giant, and the stencil is a very simple black and white image of a face. And now, Andre the Giant, not a particularly significant cultural icon, wasn't the point of the sticker. So Shepard writes on his website that phenomenology is the process of letting things manifest themselves. Phenomenology attempts to enable people to see clearly something that's right before their eyes but obscured. Things that are so taken for granted that they are muted by abstract observation. And the aim of phenomenology is to reawaken a sense of wonder about one's environment. The The obey sticker attempts to stimulate curiosity and bring people to question both the sticker and their relationship with their surroundings. This is really interesting because the sticker itself doesn't hold a lot of meaning. But what does interest Shepard and other artists who are brave enough to share their work in the public landscape are the reactions of the people who see the work. Because the reactions, the responses to the work, while they're not intrinsically present in that piece of work, say a lot more about the observer, about perhaps their unresolved emotional angst or disposition at the time when they see the work than it does about the work itself. So phenomenology, allowing things to manifest themselves with wonder and curiosity. Interesting concept when we think about overthinking. Because in our culture, at least in my generation growing up, before we had the capacity to do a lot and to do a lot very quickly, to publish things ourselves, planning was very important. If you're going to convince somebody to publish a piece of your work, the idea was this would take a lot of forward planning and forethought. The work had to be intrinsically meaningful. It had to be something that people wanted. It had to be sensitive to the taste of the market and the consumer. Otherwise, it wouldn't get published. This is quite a juxtaposition with today's world, and perhaps not all things. Street art's a great example because street art has never waited for permission. It never went through the committees. It never asked, am I being sensitive to the taste of the intended consumer or market? Because nobody was making any money from it, at least not initially anyway. Nobody ever put up a piece thinking, is this going to resonate with the local community so that I'll get paid? No, instead, the art was simply left to public interpretation. And the internet has allowed us, without perhaps trespassing or creating any sort of illegal, potentially illegal activity, it's allowed us to share our work with the world, to post it, to publish it, to make it available for public interpretation and conversation with very little resistance. You can post your artwork to Instagram. You can post your videos, your movies to YouTube. You can post your podcasts of all your random musings to the internet for free now through Spotify. Now this shift calls into question the old paradigm which demanded a lot of forethought and planning. Idioms like know your why, or perhaps starting with the end in mind, or being conscious of the consumer. Even thinking about in social work or youth work, where I've spent most of my time, the idea that we have to have evidence-based interventions and methods so that we can show before we try to do anything that yes, this is a proven strategy that is accepted and is probably going to get an expected result. This is very different to a game of under-nines basketball. So in the final 40 seconds, less than 40 seconds, after Jethro managed to tie the score with his shot from the free throw line, the other team obtained possession of the ball and they raced down to the other end of the court. And then, with only 30 seconds or less on the clock, Jethro again... No, he didn't. No, that happened after. Sorry, I'll get this order of events right. The other team managed to get possession of the ball, raced down to the other end of the court, found one of their key scoring players, who is an absolute jet, and managed to sink baskets from all over the court without almost a second thought. He puts up a shot and puts the Titans ahead by 2 points. Now, Jethro at this point looks up at the clock, and there's only around 10 seconds left. At this point, there's a turnover due to like a little jump ball. So Jed's team gets the ball from the sideline. Pass to Jed. Jed races towards the other end of the court. And just as the siren's about to go, he has the presence of mind to know that there's only seconds on the clock. He's from half court, takes the ball in one hand and attempts to lob it towards the basket. Because that's what he's seen them do in the NBA, of course. They lob the ball at the end of the game from half court to try and hit that winning basket on the buzzer. Not that his under nine's arms had a chance of making that sort of shot. But as the buzzer goes, even though his half court effort falls well short of the ring, he jumps up in the air and fist pumps because he's had the best time of his life. And to me, the proud dad moment here is not just that he's been able to hold his cool and play so well under pressure, but that he's got it already. He's got the understanding that it's not about the outcome. He's been able to detach from the outcome and just give himself with absolute joy and enthusiasm to the game. And as a result of that, the kid played a fantastic game of basketball. He brought all his skills to the best of his ability to that game. And I think, wow, as adults, as his dad, I wish I could do that when it comes to my work, when it comes to the things that I want to do in life, when it comes to all the things that I overthink, overplan, and talk myself out of. Imagine if you could just give yourself to the game and completely detach from the outcome. And in a world where phenomenology is more important than convincing the gatekeepers to publish your work, perhaps that's the lesson for us as adults too. Just make the thing. Just play the game. And then let the results take care of themselves. Let the audience decide if they want to continue listening, continue watching, continue engaging with the material that you've created. Or if perhaps they want to hit stop and move on to the next video. There's billions of hours of content out there. So there's no shortage of other places to go for your entertainment or informational needs. To tie this up, let's talk about Bruce Lee. Because I like Bruce Lee. What a legend. In one of his movies, he says, "Not thinking, yet not dreaming. Ready for whatever may come. When the opponent expands, I contract. And when he contracts, I expand. And when there is opportunity, I do not hit. It hits all by itself." It hits all by itself. They're referring, of course, to his fists. Because in the heat of a battle, in the midst of a fight, when emotions are high, when pressure is there, and there's a very real likely possibility that there's only going to be one person left standing at the end of this exchange, the ability to let go and to allow the wisdom of the body to take over, to allow a different kind of knowing to take over, is crucial. And when we can do that, we enter the flow. I'm not saying you can't do this without some preparation. Before the under-9s basketball semi-final, Jed and I were out at the basketball ring every morning before school, shooting baskets, playing one-on-one over and over again. And without that practice, maybe those shots may not have dropped in. But because it was drilled in, because the muscle memory was there, because he had dialed in his shooting, when the time came, and the opportunity presented itself. He didn't need to take the shots. It took the shots all by itself. Wow, what a way to be in the world. Completely present, engaged, and happy just to play the game, full of enthusiasm and joy, regardless of the outcome. So if you haven't gone out and watched an under-9s basketball game before, don't, unless you know somebody, because it'd be a bit odd and they might escort you out of the building. But wow, there's so much we can learn from our kids in those years of innocence, that childlike wonder and curiosity and awe, just to find out what would happen, just to see how good they can play without overthinking it, without over-planning it, because you can't entirely plan a game of basketball. You have to be ready to flex and respond to the opposition and their behavior on the court. And that is completely out of your hands. So this week, whatever challenges you may be faced with, whatever projects you've been planning or over planning, let's see if we can move from knowing our why to just doing it to find out why. From starting with the end in mind to just setting out, not knowing where the journey may take us, but trusting that every step of the way is an experience we'll learn from. And perhaps moving from evidence-based methods to trusting in our own creativity, to trusting that, yeah, we've read the evidence-based stuff, we've done that, and perhaps there's a new way to move things forward. And in the very least, let's find a fun way to do that together. Until next time, this has been Mark on the Baku podcast. Go well, and I will speak to you again soon.